Hello and welcome back to the Triton LEGO Railway layout. We are here with a brand new segment for the layout, and this is basically my take of the Sodor Steamworks. It's a slightly bigger maintenance shed, with the other shed now being a proper one for the engines just to rest in. This one is much more dedicated for fixing and repairing locomotives and preparing them for their runs. I would like to quickly apologise for the awkward display here, given the rearrangement of my room and given the size of this segment. It's a bit difficult to try and get down and show things in detail, which I will be able to do later on, but the overall look like this is going to be a bit more tricky to do. So let's start at the front end of this segment. So this has been shown off as the inside of this segment. This is better for presentation sakes, and to my newer subscribers that haven't seen my layouts before, my layout has two running lines, which is what you can see here, and the inside has the switch right at the very end to maximize the available space for what I wanted to do for this maintenance shed. There are a lot of details I will get into in just a moment, but I want to address where this is going. So the original plan for this segment was for it to be on the side of the goods yard. But the problem I have is I've figured out a way of how I can make a new segment fit a table. And a traditional table size is 6 feet by 2.5 feet. And what you're looking at here is basically 7 base plates, 7 32 by 32 base plates specifically, by 3 base plates. And that basically perfectly takes up one of those standard tables that I would use at a LEGO show. Now, I could make more of these and slot them into the layout however I want to, but given how the goods yard is slightly longer than this, it's difficult for me to slot this in and kind of balance how the curves are going to fit on the end of the layout, especially now that they are much wider in radius. So instead, this is going to be positioned behind the super train station. This will mean that on both sides of the station there will be a shed, but I think it will ultimately be better. Besides, I have a very interesting plan ready to go for where the scrapyard used to be. Now that's another thing. This is quite ironic that the scrapyard itself got scrapped in order for me to make this. Whilst that was an interesting segment, plans for expansion on the railway are ever growing, and there are more things I want to be able to do. So the scrapyard building itself was used to be able to make this new building, which again I will go into in just a moment. There is a lot to talk about when it comes to this segment. But overall, it was definitely necessary to make something that was just a bit better. Whilst it was definitely a small segment and fits where it was supposed to go, this I think was something that was much nicer. So what on earth is this thing? I believe the original name for this is called a traverser. You get the idea of what this is supposed to be. It's like a transfer table. It moves from one running line to another, and this takes up the space of a turntable. The original plan was for me to make another shed, a proper big one, using a turntable, but since my layout is very low down, as you can see, the track is on 2 plates for the ballast, and that's pretty much it. There's no mills system going on. There's nothing that kind of increases the depth of the track or anything like that. So I had to be very careful with what I wanted to include. Again, a turntable was very interesting because, it's a turntable. It's pretty cool. But I can't apply it here because it will be way too tall. However, I was only just able to get away with this. And this uses a few plates, and ultimately it's down to the success of the blue track pieces. Because normal track pieces are rails with plates underneath them. These blue track pieces are the individual rails. So you can get a few plates underneath these to match the height that I have for my layout. And it's all flush and it's all perfect. And I'm so proud of the fact that I was able to get this to work. I'm also using a number of black track pieces. These are off-brand pieces from an old LEGO train set that I bought a while ago, and I still have a fair few of these to hand, but the whole point of these was that I wanted to be able to cut them down to have this flat side, as you can see here. There's no connection point, it's perfectly smooth with the end of the bricks, and that is what ultimately allows me to use this traverser to its full effect. If you want to see this in motion, then you can check out this clip I put on my Instagram page. It is a very smooth and very cool thing to be able to behold. Now, the black track pieces are pretty fine for what they are. I do have some off-brand grey ones, which I would have preferred. I'm never going to cut or otherwise modify straight track pieces because they are expensive and very precious. However, the off-brand ones that I've got have issues when it comes to connecting them to themselves and other pieces underneath the connection points of those tracks. So the black ones would have to do. And just before we get to the shed, I want to show off this small hut here. It's kind of like a signal box, but it's not really a signal box. It has access to the switch there at the end of the segment, as well as the controls to the traverser. Now, there probably should be a signal at these points because, you know, with how this is connected to a running line, there should be a signal somewhere. That would be something for me to build in the future. But the building itself is nothing special, and it's more so a project of using some colors and some pieces that I haven't really used otherwise. This uses a lot of these dark tan masonry bricks, and there are a few other tan bricks in order for it to get the overall detail. It's interesting to say the least, because again, this is a color I've never really built with before. I very nearly once again stuck to using the light grey masonry bricks because that's something I'm used to. But I think for the sake of using different colors, I think it works. And now for the maintenance shed itself. So this is the new official maintenance shed. The other one that I built that had a red body is now just a normal engine shed. There won't be anything special going on in there. And there are a few internal details that I need to remove from that one and to apply to this one, which is why if you were to look inside now, it is a bit bare bones. But that again isn't an issue because I know where the other details are provided from. So to save myself a few bricks, I could just grab those from another segment. This building would normally also have a roof, but the problem is I don't want to build one. It will be very restricting when it comes to the view of this building, as well as that's going to cost a lot of money, that's a lot of bricks, it's going to take up storage space, and ultimately for the viewing sakes, I'd rather not make a roof because it just looks nicer when it's open as well. Again, realistically it would have a roof, but for my sakes it's not going to have one. And in place of that, we have these blue rails going along the top, as well as the crane and the claw that came from the scrapyard. That claw is still one of my favourite things I've ever built. It's something that looks really finicky and cool and a bit scary at the same time. You could definitely set up some moody scenes with a train underneath the claw and get some good pictures. That's definitely a project I will have to do one day. The floor has been elevated to match the height of the track, and it is a very clean looking floor. I wasn't too sure what tile I originally wanted to use, but after finding out I had a very plentiful amount of 1x8 light bluish grey tiles, I went ahead and used these. I also had to place a bricklink order with 200 more. Turns out it wasn't quite enough, so yeah, I had to make another order just to fill in that last small gap. But yes, I do ultimately love how the grey and the black rails kind of clash in this unique way. We're so used to seeing dark grey track pieces, but because I have some black ones to hand, it's such a nicer look in my opinion. A much rarer one, and I think one that nobody else will really want to go for, but for me and my layout, I love this. And that is it for this showcase video. Thank you all ever so much for watching. Coming back to the layout is a very interesting task because it's already big enough, and I do need to remind myself making it bigger is ultimately unwise because of its overall size already. But I still have so many ideas for things I want to be able to add to the layout. But at the same time, this is stuff I don't necessarily need. So again, there's that internal back and forth as to whether I want to make it or not. I still have the dual gauge loop to make. And there's now the question of what am I going to fit in the space that goes next to the goods yard. So the scrap yard was by far the smallest segment I have made for my layout. But I need to now make something that is the length of the scrap yard and now the length of this segment in order to fill that gap. I do have something in mind. The pieces have already arrived. If you follow me on Instagram, you might know what's coming next. And the interesting thing about it is that segment is going to be the biggest one by far, but at the same time, it could be the busiest segment I've got, or the quietest and the blandest. But that will make sense when you see it. So thank you all ever so much for watching. Be sure to keep an eye on the community tab for polls and updates. Be sure to follow me on Flickr and Instagram for some behind the scenes pictures for what I am up to with current projects. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye bye.